Fairness isn't always giving someone the same thing. Try to tell this to my kids every day. It's about giving them what they need to succeed in that role, which is important. And that is where the rubber meets the road in business. You got to pay people that have to be in person more, fine, so be it. If you think someone's a great remote worker in a way that nobody ever could, pay them for that skill. But don't think for a second that everyone needs to be in the office. That seems much more manipulative and or short-sighted than is necessary.
We are at the nexus of something greater. This is our story about building a remote-only company that spans the entire globe. This is the future of business, technology, and global remote work. You are watching Discovering the Possible.
Welcome back. I'm Chris Nolte, the host of Discovering the Possible, the future of business, technology, and global remote work. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of the remote work debate. Why do some people prefer working at home? When is it appropriate? And why are CEOs pushing us back to work? We'll also ask, when does face-to-face interaction truly matter? How many birthday parties do we really need to go to? And when is it just a relic of outdated office culture that should quickly die? Stay tuned. What are the factors that drive work from home success? And who thrives and who doesn't? My experience in working from home causes me to think about the factors that drive work from home success. Now, this has nothing to do with your boss's attitudes or your colleagues' attitudes. It can be broken down into three parts: personality, job function, and work environment or family circumstances. Let's deal with personality first. There are a few predominant factors in what drives introverts to want to work from home. First, they excel at deep work and they're comfortable working alone. Their makeup is one of focused work and focused effort, and they don't need interaction to stay energized. This comes with its own level of self-discipline, and they enjoy having their space to themselves and being uninterrupted. And lastly, being independent in the way they've worked and grown up, they require less social interaction, can manage themselves independently, and communicate well through written communication and mediums. Beyond personality, there's the person's role in their company. Certain tasks like coding or writing, they just translate more smoothly to remote work. Others, like on-site manufacturing or hands-on customer service, just simply don't scale remotely. It's interesting to look at common industries that hire remote professionals, virtual assistants in traditional nomenclature, to see where these roles reside. First, entrepreneurship leads the pack, 23%. Desk and chairs businesses like consulting, coaching, and marketing also are very prominent. Between those four segments, you have over 50% of the marketplace of people that hire remote professionals or virtual assistants into their world. These are similar to the ones that will allow their employees to work from home or work from home themselves. Within the virtual assistant industry itself, the functions in which they operate are digital marketing, e-commerce, customer support, real estate, healthcare, and also legal firms. These are functions within industries that hire remote people to get their work done. It also means that they're going to have the best access to the best value and the best expertise. If you think about who you hire in your business to consult you or to coach you or to help you market or even run your technology platforms, most likely those people are not geographically close to you. They might be on the other side of the planet or the other side of the country. And so this makes sense that those folks would otherwise get to work from home. In 2025, you're going to see more of the same in terms of virtual assistant roles and or just work from home roles, whether it be customer support or IT or cybersecurity or sales managers or social media managers. These are the roles that are easily managed from home and take nothing away from the business or don't require people to be in person. So if you find yourself hiring for one of these roles, remote professionals, virtual assistants, or people working from home could be a really good alternative for you.
Discovering the Possible is presented by Kayana. Visit hirekayana.com right now to hire the top 1% Filipino professionals smarter and faster. That's hirekayana.com.
Now, of course, family setups also play a role in whether or not someone is looking to work from home or not. This is especially true for people with young families. You see, parents juggling childcare alongside Slack notifications, that's a lot better than the alternative in many circumstances. Single folks, especially in tiny apartments, often wrestle with blurred boundaries between work and personal space. While it comes with a cost, it can oftentimes be a wonderful solution in an already difficult circumstance. Finally, geography has something to do with whether or not work from home is more desirable. Even if you have a personality, an extroverted personality that would want to keep you at home, even if you might have a function that might be better in person than remote, if your career opportunities are not where you live, remote is more likely the opportunity you're going to pursue, only because it'll give you the best chances to further your career and to get rewarded for your expertise. This is certainly the case if you're working remotely. As a day job, I meet people from all around the world where their talent is not well understood in their local communities, whether that be people in the Philippines or people in Kenya or South Africa or Colombia. Sometimes, whether your personality or your life circumstance or your career merit it, oftentimes your best opportunities are working from home. And yet, there's a drumbeat of CEOs pulling us back to the office. And the question becomes, based on this sort of myriad of factors that would otherwise suggest someone should work in the office or work from home, it causes one to think whether they are right or they're wrong in their mandate. At the end of 2024, 90% of 1,000 plus decision makers urge their employees back to the office. So 1,000 is not everyone, but it's an incredibly large sample size. And what they did to urge them back was to offer them commuter benefits, catering meals, childcare benefits, raises, or a negative incentive, fired the people that didn't comply. Who's to say whether these benefits will stick? But it was certainly a way to, quote unquote, bury the hatchet and ask people to do something that they didn't actually want to do. So why then are leaders calling their employees back to the office? Well, as I'd mentioned earlier, this was an attitude that I had early on in my career. If I was going to go to the office, I wanted everyone else to be in the office. I specifically remember one of my key lieutenants saying, I think we should work from home on Friday. And I said, absolutely not. I thought that was soft. He couldn't have been more right, it turns out. And now that I see it, I'm thinking of that mindset and the mindset of my colleague in the context of the call to action and bringing back people to the office. So let's evaluate that for a second in three particular ways. One is the reason why leaders are ostensibly calling their people back. These calls for action revolve around two specific details. One is culture and collaboration. Whether you're Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, many CEOs argue that spontaneous water cooler exchanges drive creativity, which is, of course, something that's hard to replace via Zoom. Now, I might argue with that to some extent, but admittedly, in a couple weeks' time, I'm going to Cebu, Philippines to do an in-person team building exercise with my own teammates who I see all the time remotely. So there's probably something to that. Then there's the issues of control and accountability. Some CEOs see remote work as a barrier to quick team discussions or real-time oversight, and more specifically, the latter, real-time oversight. I get it. There's this issue of resource management and time management that a CEO feels like he paid for. When a person is employed by you, you think you own a certain part of their time. And in fact, people are expected to be in the office from some period of time. It's in the employee handbook, but it really doesn't have anything to do with their output now, does it? And so it makes you wonder whether or not this is about control or about output. And it leads me to believe it's more about control. But there are some times when being in person matters. And I can only imagine complex problem solving issues where certain brainstorming sessions or project kickoffs need to happen in person. There's something about body language and or proximity that allows people to work quickly and effectively. Or maybe you're just trying to capture the moment or mark time with a certain corporate event where you want everyone to be together in that moment. May that be an important announcement, for example. This is where retreats and offsites often aim to build camaraderie that's tough to foster through Slack channels and Zoom calls alone. It just feels cold to deliver an important message over Zoom. And I think what you've seen in some of these YouTube firing videos where someone is getting fired, what feels to be in a very impersonal way.
Decided to hire too many people and are now actually realizing that they can't afford this many people and they're letting that go. If that's the real answer, I would rather just you tell me that instead of making up some bullshit and telling me that right before I lose my job from someone that I've never met before, if you can respect that.
I don't think Dom or myself today is going to give you any clarity or answers that's going to meet the expectations that you're communicating to us.
Are there any reasons other than just like restructuring? Like, what's the reason for the restructuring?
That's a really good question. It has to do with the company is doing consolidated priorities this year and next year.
Firing's hard to begin with, but to do it remotely just somehow feels even worse. So we're left wondering, is your boss right by asking you to come back to the office? I mean, it could be nostalgia for an office culture that thrived pre-pandemic where people walk the halls to stay connected to their teams. Or it might be a tactical effort to weed out those that are less inclined to comply or are team players. This is what you see happening in the United States government now, where people are being told to come back to the office, and employees of the government that might not want to come back are basically easy fires with that sort of mandate. So while some employees love the idea of heading back for the buzz or the social fix that they get, whether it's because they can't stay at home, they just can't take it anymore, or functionally they have to be in the office to do their job, others see mandated returns as a relic of top-down micromanagement or control, which quite frankly, after COVID, might not be as palatable to truly talented and or knowledge working communities. So the corporate pullback to the office, is this founded in reality or is this something built out of control? You don't have to look too far in the newspaper today to know that the cattle call back to the office is on. The question is it founded in reality or is it just a control move? So it seems pretty important to look at the drivers of why leaders are calling people back. And as we see it, there are two predominant points that they bring up. On the one hand, you have the arguments around culture and collaboration and functional requirements. On the side of culture and collaboration, many CEOs argue that spontaneous water cooler exchanges drive creativity. We've heard this trope time and time again. I'm not sure I'm buying it. But it is true that some functional roles have to be in person. This is especially true for blue-collar workers or people that are part of factory settings or warehouse settings. But for knowledge workers, I don't really see that as being real. I think actually what's calling leaders to bring people back is control and accountability. They simply don't know how to provide real-time oversight with remote teams. So when does it really matter if someone's in the office? Let's dig into that a little bit. And I think it has to do with two fundamental things. One is complex problem solving. Whether you're a blue-collar worker or a white-collar worker, certain brainstorming sessions or kickoffs just have to be in person to build the appropriate amount of momentum or the critical mass of brainstorming that being in person demands, whether that's real body language or communication and impact and the ability to riff in real time. Being in person matters in those moments. Also, there are just moments where we just have to be together. Think of your own family. Sometimes you just have to come together, whether it be for birthdays or for major events, weddings, etc., where companies also need to be together, whether that be retreats or offsites that are aimed to build camaraderie. That's just simply tough to foster through Slack channels and Zoom calls alone. Let's face it, those team building exercises out of the office often stick with you longer than a countless number of work meetings in the office. So the question remains, if some employees love heading back for the buzz and social interaction, and others see this as a mandated return to the office and a relic of top-down management, who's right? Who's wrong? I think the jury is out, but I do think that ultimately, because of the scarcity of talent, the talent will decide. And what will ultimately happen, whether Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg has anything to do with it, they're going to have to buy people's compliance away from work from home circumstances. So the way this might end up looking, and here's the interesting thing, it may look like people from home or work from home arrangements are getting paid less or somehow being punished, when in fact, what's more likely happening is people that come to the office are getting rewarded. I guess we'll find out. So there's no question that in-person time is valuable. I myself am about to get on a plane to the Philippines to meet with my own internal team to do team building and relationship building in a way that we just simply can't do, even though we meet all the time and every day. Because after all, team building fosters a sense of belonging and helps onboard new hires well and or builds trust that just is hard to establish virtually. But let's look at how people are doing in the US to figure out where team bonding is most prevalent and how HR and or executives are solving the in-person time that's so important. And I have to say, honestly, by looking at the chart and data that we have from New Lab, that it's pretty predictable. First, a lot of it revolves around food. After all, how better to bring people together than food? People will show up for that. So whether it's food-related potlucks or team lunches or holiday events or work-sponsored events with alcohol, a lot of people are driving their in-person time with food. Then there's workshops that are intended to help you work on yourself or to train you up. That's just best taught in person oftentimes. So as someone who has managed a company before and who is about to get on a plane in the next few weeks to go to the Philippines, I absolutely recognize that there's a time and a place for in-person interaction. There's simply no replacing it. And even if it costs money, it's worth it. It's good to be in person because it builds trust and it allows you to brainstorm in a way that's just difficult to do virtually. And it just mixes it up. Somehow deepens the bonds that are between us. And yet, when I reflect back on my corporate life, I think of all the things we did to build team bonding, and I just cringe at the thought. And I was the guy who's coming up with all these ideas. Let's go through the list. Team bonding activities that U.S. employees have experienced at least once. First of all, I would sort of chalk this up into a couple categories. One is ideas that get people together using food, potlucks, holiday events, or work-sponsored events with alcohol. If you're going to get people together, food is always a great driver. In a way, these are events that people ultimately end up being somewhat indifferent about, but at least they got fed. Then there's the things that show up as important, like workshops, which actually I think are today as prominent remote as they are in person. I think this is the event where, or the rare circumstance where the trainer has established a higher rate for an in-person meeting and the client wants to make sure that their employees show up. Then there are all the rest of them, icebreakers, sports, brain teasers, personality tests. It's just so awkward. I mean, the one thing that's not on this list, and I'm surprised it's not, it's birthdays. One of my most awkward corporate experiences was when the owner of the company held a birthday party for me on my 40th birthday. I just felt so out of place and so uncomfortable, and I knew no one wanted to be there, worst of all. So what do? We try to hide those birthday events with multiple birthdays so we seem caring, and yet we really know it's just something we do to get people together, and no one really benefits. Sorry to say. So I think there's actually something to be desired in the way U.S. employees come together. And you could probably throw out a bunch of these and really focus on company retreats. While they're expensive, they're more valuable, and they bring an experience back home with them they might not otherwise get. So let's just say we excluded or ruled out all of these other in-person events. When is it time to have one of those more meaningful company retreats? And how long can you go without having one? You'd be surprised. I think the value is in the quality, not the frequency. I don't believe that those moments where a good in-person event wears off after a few days. I don't think it wears off even after a couple months. I think tight-knit teams spending real quality time together in an authentic way can last for a really long time. If you think back on your own life and where you built real relationships, it's in those special moments. It's not in the classroom. It's in those times in and between and around those activities that really stick out. It's those times when my college classmates went on a road trip, or when my business school buddies and I went skiing. It isn't the time in and around lunch or dinner or that one dance that really made the difference. Sometimes it has to do with the size of your team. Large events, for me, never had much of a punch. Well, even if it was an elaborate event, because I didn't feel connected to the people at those moments, it just didn't have the same impact. So in smaller teams, even a quarterly gathering can have a big impact, or an impact that maybe an in-person gathering of a much larger company wouldn't have. If you're smaller, you could probably do this less frequently. Finally, there's the intent. Let's face it, random lunches, coffee chats, water cooler, it's not as memorable. I know that some CEOs like to believe that that water cooler chat is what drives performance. I'm not buying it, because I'm living a life of a person with a remote first team, and it's remarkable what you can accomplish. I'll tell you, the relationships that our remote professionals are fostering with their clients is extraordinary. And oftentimes the clients are talking about their remote professionals in ways no one would ever talk in person about their own employees, let alone someone that lives 7,000 miles away. So I just don't find that argument legitimate. You don't have to be in person, though I do believe that there is something missing. You just have to program it right. It has to be authentic and might have nothing to do with work, as many of our corporate retreats do. Finally, how do you dial us in? Well, I think it's safe to say that you could cut back on some of these more routine in-person gatherings if you're US-based in-person business. As remarkable as that sounds, is it a few days in the office? Is hybrid work really necessary? Could we be hybrid 1 week a month? Maybe. I think that could be done. Others might opt for monthly or quarterly gatherings, or in our case, maybe even semi-annual gatherings, or maybe meetups, or environments that don't feel like work, where there is no mandatory requirement to show up. I think that's where it shows up best, as to whether or not your employees or your team really value this. Schedule it and don't make it mandatory, and then see what happens. If you have to bribe people with food and or run around the office trying to get commitments days before the event. People don't value it. And I'm not sure why companies should either. In-person activities are not automatically better. They're simply tools, powerful ones when used properly and under the right circumstances that can deepen trust and align teams in important ways. But it is not the fuel that you're working with. It's the commitment and passion of your team. And quite frankly, that comes from inside the person, not in birthday parties or holiday events or gift exchanges. This is a thing of the past. These are vestiges of the past and are quite frankly not necessary and are more awkward than they're needed. And now a reflection on the industry of remote professionals and agencies that they truly have the interests of the remote professionals in mind. I have heard stories of agencies, US-based agencies, run by American entrepreneurs who have built remote professional operations and have taken years before they actually make an in-person appearance amongst their people. And I think that's ironic in light of what I've just said. And yet there's a certain something to demonstrating caring and authenticity of caring to showing up. So if you're one of those agencies that just hasn't shown up, or you're an investor that hasn't visited the company that you own, I would highly recommend that you do exactly as I suggest and show up. And if you need to do that in a company retreat, perfect. If you need that event to pull that off, your people want to see you and they do want you to show caring. It's much like a political event. You're going to lose the state if you don't show up and show that you care. Fundamental and critical to showing you care, not a requirement of operating the business though. So every day I meet people from 7,000 miles away with an interest in working remotely for American and other English-speaking companies. Every one of them has skills and capabilities that port really, really well to knowledge management jobs or administrative jobs that are easily done remotely. And yet there are certain parts of the marketplace and certain parts of employment that will never be touched because the people simply have to be in person. And this really played out very nicely, this sort of dichotomy between knowledge workers or white collar workers that can work from home and blue collar workers or factory workers or warehouse workers or logistics workers and or retail workers that just have to be in person to perform their work. With a conversation that Elon Musk had regarding his policies related to Tesla and SpaceX, where he said everyone has to come back to the office because at the end of the day, it was unfair that some people could work from home and some people had to come into the office. And I thought this is some really interesting posturing because this idea of fairness is no longer about interests. It's a moral issue. He made it a moral issue, basically telling the white collar workers that it's not fair that they get to work from home. And so they have to come back out of fairness and caring. Now, to me, this is an interesting argument because I would have expected him to come at this with we could perform better, we could brainstorm better, we could deliver better solutions for our clients better. But no, he made it a moral issue. He felt that it was unfair. And within a single company, it's interesting that this became an issue because, let's face it, we had knowledge workers working side by side with the people building the products that they designed and marketed and sold. And in that regard, it held more water. And the fact of the matter is Elon Musk is a master at framing problems in a way in which he wishes to see them. I think he's a very smart person. Just as he's framing the arguments for federal workers that they have to come back to the office as a way to force retirement for many of them. So I have a hard time believing him, and yet there is this issue of fairness. And it reminds me of compensation and how fairness typically gets worked out within a remote or in any job environment. And it's usually with pay. I think Elon Musk could have simply just paid his in-person workers more and or pay his remote people less. Or, said another way, because he didn't have to pay for the office or any of those other accoutrements of bringing people to the office, he might value really good remote workers more, for example. And ultimately, the fairness would be worked out in the compensation. That was not his choice. And I think it was less than or more than convenient that he used this fairness argument to bring people back. It's just not true. So the equitable solutions become perks like commuter stipends, extra PTO, flex schedules for roles that just can't go remote. And being transparent at the end of the day and providing transparent communication about why certain positions require physical presence prevents this sort of resentful why them, not me sentiment. And maybe they feel valued in other ways. I guess the question remains, where do we draw the line between necessary on-site work and artificially imposed rules? Fairness isn't always giving someone the same thing. Try to tell this to my kids every day. It's about giving them what they need to succeed in that role, which is important. And that is where the rubber meets the road in business. You got to pay people that have to be in person more, fine, so be it. If you think someone's a great remote worker in a way that nobody ever could, pay them for that opportunity or that skill. But don't think for a second that everyone needs to be in the office. That seems much more manipulative and or short-sighted than is necessary. So when you're in a remote-first company like I am, you tend to see the things that drive performance working from home, whether it be because I'm doing it myself and I've managed these things, or I see it in my colleagues who are really top performers. And it really comes down to about 4 items. One, it's really important to set boundaries because, and what I mean by that is when you're expected to be at work and doing work and when you're not expected to be doing work and when you're not at work, there's nothing more satisfying to know when your day is ended. And as a routine, our company starts on time and ends on time, as hard as it might be to believe. It creates also great barriers for me, because I would normally be working always. And truthfully, it was not healthy for me. And I'm living a much better life being able to shut things off. 2, beyond real boundaries and time and space, structured check-ins also help. By having structured meetings, you feel connected to the business in a very reliable, regular way. Whether that's regular team huddles to keep everyone aligned, or just being physically together, or even scattered across time zones, but in one meeting all at once. This structure matters, and we start every day together and we end every day together. Now, this is part of our EOS platform that does this, but these stand-up meetings are critical to us staying on task and feeling connected to the business. And the minute we deviate from that, I feel disconnected and out of control. Another resource and way of thinking about being successful in a work-from-home environment is to think about abundance and not scarcity. When you're at work, it can often feel like you're constrained by resources. You don't have the team near you. You don't have your technology infrastructure next to you. You can't just walk down the hall and engage with someone. While that might not be true practically, it's important to know, especially if you're an entrepreneur, that there's a sea of opportunity and talent out there that you can engage in a persistent way, whether it be through a remote professional or agency service like Kayana, or through a gig economy like Fiverr or Upwork. People that can do things and help you in those moments of feelings of scarcity can really drive a sense of progress and engagement that you might not otherwise have. Finally, there's the network beyond the work. And whether that's a mastermind or a support group or people that you otherwise would network in person with that you're now networking remotely with, and finding scheduled time with those people can be invaluable. I myself have 2 or 3 standing meetings each week to stay in touch with people that matter to me personally and matter to my career. So as I think about running a company today, if you are truly a leader that believes that some of your team needs to be in person, and which also means that some of your people need to be remote or can be remote, the most important thing you do is to be extremely transparent about your policies and to make sure that people aren't simply excluded from being remote for some sort of mandate and loose principle that you may or may not have. Or if they must be in the office, you should offer them benefits or additional payment or flexible time off to recognize their contributions in that regard. It's important to remember that avoiding the appearance of favoritism will help you keep resentment at bay, and that's the worst thing for a company's culture. Finally, you have to ask yourself, when making any policy, what's more important to you, compliance or retention? At the end of the day, people are going to vote with their feet. If forced returns don't align with a company or employee's lifestyle, expect people to start shopping around for a more flexible employer. This is not a warning, just a reality. It's the way the marketplace is going to play out. And if you need to avoid that, you might just have to pay up or expand your benefits. Or if nothing else, make sure you keep the benefits you've given them so you don't pull them away and create resentment. So to recap, some people were made for working from home, whether it be because of their personality, their family situation, their opportunity set, or quite frankly, the function they find themselves in. Companies need to be flexible about how they deal with different types of roles and different types of people to create the type of environment that works best for them, not best for the CEO with control issues. So as you think about Elon Musk and as you think about Mark Zuckerberg, who are forcing everyone back to work, you have to remember where you as a company fit in the food chain and where you as a employee fit within the food chain. If you have the skills and capabilities to go remote, and that fits best with your personal personality and your personal situation, and quite frankly, your function or career goals, by all means, pursue it. If you're a company that needs those sorts of people, it's important for you to consider their needs. It's just as important to understand your audience that you sell your products to as to understand the audience that you depend on selling them. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Discovering the Possible. Join us next time as we continue to explore the shifting landscape of business, technology, and global remote work. Remember, the future is flexible and exciting, but it's only ours to shape. One policy, one project, one team building event at a time.